Alright, hello and welcome in today's video where we will be looking at a scenario where civilization starts over. Now, in the last episode, a lot of stuff happened, like the final finish of the Great Egyptian-Greek War, which ended actually, surprisingly, in an Egyptian victory, as well as a few other factors as the war had expanded into a few other fronts, and actually, it has technically not finished just yet. Now, with obviously with a few other things, hopefully guys you do enjoy this video. If you guys do enjoy it, obviously, please do like, subscribe if you haven't already, as we are trying to get to 2K, which probably not, but keep your hopes up, okay? And if you guys also have any suggestions for the series, because I haven't really mentioned that in a real long time, but if you guys have any suggestions that you want me to do in this series, like for example, I don't know, blow up the blue team into a quadrillion pieces, comment the idea. I could potentially do it. I could potentially not. You never know. But without further ado, let's get on straight into this video. Now, with a lot of stuff, I did say a few things, as we would focus on Asia a little more, which we will, since we mainly focus on the European front. And I also said how Ethiopia, this little area, will be quite important for the future, and specifically the next episode, which is also correct. And as we see, specifically as it is, it's all normal and stuff, where we have this little area just doing their own silly little thing, where they're expanding into a lot of these areas, and if I'm not mistaken, some of it is quite mountainous, but that's quite alright, because what we see them is mostly just do some expansion, as well as this one kind of go a little along this coast and go a little southward. Now what we also see is this light cyan teal team will also do their fair share of expansion, making their connection right over there, and also do some expansion in the south. And last but not least, we have this little red country right over here, which is probably the weakest one out of the three. And I mean, to be honest, these two are fine, but let's just say this one is not really liked upon by the other two, because they just have a lot of conflicting ideas on what they want and what is right or what is wrong, in simple words. But with that, we have these three looking, in the end, something, just got to fix the borders, but essentially something like this. There we go. But the main thing I talked about, or at least wanted to talk about, is this area right over here. Essentially, this gets very quickly colonized, but what they do find is a little thing. It's like a little piece of paper, in a way. It's a map. Like, I mean, when you think about it. Because it's quite simple and quite similar to what they usually project. As, let's say, for example, we have the Germanic areas right over here. You would have the countries, of course, some blue areas, the ocean, and then you obviously have the little capital cities. But with this map, it's exactly that. And only difference is, so far, it is somewhere in this world where they haven't seen it. So what they're guessing is that there's potentially some countries hidden somewhere in this lake, which I'll show the picture right now. So yeah, with that in mind, they're thinking that there's probably some country nearby that used to be here potentially, so maybe they move south, west, up, north, you never know, it could be anywhere. But that is their current guess. So, that is a reason actually why at least all of them will, at least for now, work together to at least try to find this brand new area, forcing a lot of people to just go very far into the country with so far no success besides them actually finding this little lake right over here. And with this, this is a really big area for some small countries, and this was done because a few countries did end up popping out of this, mostly because it got a little big and some people eventually got lost, or just felt the need that they were being pushed to do too much work, which in the end created a few countries, specifically the largest and most powerful being this pink one in the south, which while it may seem big and it has definitely a fairly high population, in terms of power, it isn't that strong, as I mean, like, it's definitely weaker than these three, but it just looks to be quite large. And we also see another smaller country right in this area over here, And last but not least, we have one actually that encompasses this entire lake right over here, which now I must draw in. And it looks something like this. And obviously we have to give them 3 good old capitals, just like so. Now, anyway, we shall, like I said, focus a little bit on Asia, because obviously we have the 3 Chinese nations over here, as well as Korea and these Manchurian countries, I think. Now, basically, what we end up seeing is most of China and a lot of them, they continue just kind of exploring in these areas as usual until, whoopa, they look over here and look at that. They end up finding India, or at least this area of India, including Bangladesh right here. And in a way, it's kind of like a standoff of like, who are you? And also, what is this? Why is there like a horrific piece of cancer here? Explain this. And then they're obviously asking what the hell's going on here, but it is mutually agreed to just kind of peacefully talk this out, because let's just say that these 2 areas right off the bat are not the best friends, and if anything, they are quite angry with each other. They don't like each other very much, but I think that's pretty obvious. The other thing is, as the Chinese, specifically this blue one right over here, did a lot of expansion in this northern area until they do find something. Basically, what we have over here is this large country over here, in simple words. And let's be honest, unlike this area, they are no little foe that will collapse anytime soon, because they are quite stable and also very large and also quite powerful, mainly a lot of power coming from this southern area, which has been their main way of just expanding these ways. And funny enough, these two cross paths, and I mean they're going to keep expanding because this has been a large thing for themselves. But obviously, this does give some worry. And I mean, since they haven't expanded in a while, I shall also give this blue country right over here some good old expansional areas. But this does just in general give a lot of worry, because you don't know what these countries is. You don't know if it's hostile, peaceful. You have no clue what it wants or what it does, because so far you've met them and they haven't really communicated to you as much as you try. So reasonable worry right there, and what they could possibly do. But in the other case, what we will also see happen is the continuation of Chinese expansion as they go into these larger areas, which I mean, they are quite big, and they are starting to get a little unstable. But while the other ones have kind of realized that and begun to calm down, the yellow central one, which is also the most powerful, hasn't really slowed down. Oh, sorry, are they the biggest country now? Oh, yes, they are. Wait, nope, they're the second biggest next to these guys. But yeah, this one's starting to get a little unstable, and as a matter of fact, they still won't stop, as they will continue all the way up into this area as they continue to expand until they reach this little river area right over here, giving them this weird little area until they eventually even connect up to this Bangladeshi country right over here, giving them the first, I guess, land contact with each other, which is quite funky and weird to say the least, at least for them. But I think the weirdest thing is how this looks, because Jesus, it is disgusting. But we won't mind that, at least for now. What we will mind, though, is how a lot of explorers have been going on here, and what they also find is obviously some more countries that have popped up in these areas, because as this has been explored slowly and steadily, mostly from this southern red Chinese country, which has started to expand their way into Vietnam, but not too much because it's obviously densely jungle and like stuff like that. But mainly what does happen over here is there is mainly one new country that is found, or at least the strongest one, and it is this southern China? It is this southern Vietnamese nation right over here, as they've been doing their own thing for quite a while. And I mean, basically the lore behind this country was, indeed, it actually dating back to South China. And in reality, it was a bunch of people that just secretly left. Because, I mean, there was a weird lack of people, mostly in this area. Well, because, I mean, obviously this wasn't taken over yet. But in this area, a lot of people did go missing. And there wasn't really an explanation to this. And in the end, it was figured out that essentially it was the southern Vietnamese nation right over here that basically just decided to leave and did it in fairly good secrecy because the last sighting was that they moved this way, which was their thought until there was nothing over here. So then they had really no clue, but also just kind of forgot about them. Kind of sad when you think about it, but have no fear because they have returned and they are back at it. But obviously, they're also not the only nation, which I must get one more country for this, which, while may seem a little silly, is their number one enemy. This country right over here, and obviously I'm going to give them some capitals. But these two are basically arch nemesis for reasons I will explain at a future date. But stepping away from this, we can make our way back into Europe, technically Africa, I guess, for this main reason of continuation on this war. As we see the troops from Italy or / Rome, I guess, they will continue to make large pushes on this area since now they could kind of like fully focus on, I guess, just trying to get all this. So what will end up happening is they will keep pushing into these areas until there's just an extremely overwhelming force, and they will actually even start making their way into this Anatolian... What? Iberia. Anatolia. What is wrong with me? I'm way too tired for this. But essentially what we will see is a large encirclement happen in this area, and as they are encircling them, the purple team actually jumps in on this, yoinking this area for themselves, as this area does continue. And, as a matter of fact, they will end up taking a little more land with this south area right here. But it doesn't stop there, as there is actually a rebel group to make it even better for them. And essentially it is the rest of Iberia that decides to go and break away, as well as this small northern area right about here. But don't worry, it gets even better. Or I guess, depends who you're rooting for, which honestly you guys could tell me, who do you want to win this war? But it doesn't matter because the capital is captured, and at this point it is a sweep fest as a couple naval invasions are made, and it just continues to go on and on until there's one last rebel group actually that ends up breaking away from this area, one last time being this country right over here, which I will give them this color. And in this peace negotiation, basically what we see is actually this country ceases to exist. It is no more. It is deleted from the world map. Gone. Because they are actually basically fully annexed by the Romans, which honestly makes them really big and powerful. That's the wrong layer. They are getting quite large. Oh, they have very much surpassed the red team. And honestly, they've probably surpassed them in strength currently, making them the number one power in the entire world. But also, you could see these areas are taken over, and you could also kind of see the slow rise of this country as they have kind of made their way, essentially starting from like right here-ish. Then they took over a few areas like the other country, and now they've expanded even more. So you never know, they could go for this country next, or maybe not. You don't know what could possibly happen. But what we also obviously have is this country right over here, which does end up splitting away, and as a matter of fact, you should not still exist. That would be pretty funny if you did, but no, you're dead, permanently. But what we do see is, in this time, this country also does begin to make their way, expanding very, very much on this coast of the... Right over here on the African coast, English, yes. Which will get them something like so. But another thing that we have to be seeing is this little country right here. They got some firepower shown by them beating their ass, at least doing quite a good job in this war, essentially even at one point owning the capital of this. But they will be making a military move, surprisingly, even though They really shouldn't be. They should be quite calm. But no, they will do a interesting decision. Attack Finland, which is not going to be taken lightly for a few reasons. Because Finland is a very chill country, and everyone likes Finland, okay? Finland's cool. Yay, Finland. But what's not cool is how Finland's also a far stronger country than you, and you could expand over here. Which begs the question, why would you even do this? Well, the simple question is, or I guess the simple answer is because they want more developed areas. And if they could succeed in this, which so far they are, that could give them a large boost to even quicker expand into these areas, becoming their number one superpower, or at least their goal of being the number one superpower on the entire planet. Or at least what they know of the world, which is this area right over here. So basically what we see them doing is using some terrain advantages, but basically tricking them into thinking they have an advantage and then kind of switcherooing the playing field. Now, it's a weird tactic, weird to describe, but it's going well, as they are actually able to even encircle this area, which had a very large major city and population. But obviously, it's not like the Finnish are going to do nothing, as they are able to make a very large counteroffensive, making their way right over here. And, I mean, they are going to continue losing ground on their way over here until the border begins to look something like this, which they are, surprisingly somehow still losing large masses of land, even though realistically they should not be. Now, the main reason for this is there may or may not be another country funding, at least this one right over here, potentially for an alliance, you never know, but point is, whatever is happening, that is the main conclusion that is actually going on, because that's not official. Because like I said, they do have really good military tactics, but people do think, specifically from most peaceful countries like this area, or like these three, that there is currently someone funding this country, seeing how good they're doing. But again, it could just be them being like really good at military. But as it goes over here, it begins to get worse and worse, as this point it's getting like unrealistic on how crazy they're doing. So the Finnish will begin to at least attempt to beat them back once more, and at least attempt to regain their major city, which they do just slightly until they will go and sue for peace. And in the peace treaty, these lands are taken and handed over to this country right over here, which honestly, at this point, is not a very liked country, seeing that they've made themselves quite a lot of enemies, and it's reasonable. You guys tell me if you like them, but personally, most countries don't. And also, what was I thinking? What in the autism am I doing? But basically, what we do also see them is taking these lands right over here. And also, finally, this little Romanian Eastern Black Sea country will also begin to take some lands, since they haven't really done anything in a long time. And while this is concerning, they are making a very bold move by taking over a lot of these areas right over here in this area, which the rest will be handed over to the red team until we have, actually I'm going to fix the border a little, until we have a border that looks something like this. And as a matter of fact, most of Europe is actually completely filled in, which I hate how this border looks. Hold on. Okay, that's still bad, but like, you know what? It's an ancient border, since when are they meant to look good? Anyway, what we do see happening is actually the complete reassert. I guess oh please, what was that? The complete discovery of the entire British Isles, and the first people on the case are going to be the French, baguette oui oui. But in this case, what we are going to see is a few countries actually emerge, as they don't really want to be a part of the French, for more reasons than one, but also because they have better things to do than be occupied by this little scumbag in some people's eyes. So what does happen is some people will just choose to start some roles and essentially like try their best to rally up a bunch of people, which will work as we have a large country that spans over the rest of these areas, uniting all the people as one. Except this would be nice until it shatters into a bunch of pieces, as this was not a very well organized government that could work very well. So what we end up seeing is a lot of greedy people who want to do their own thing and want to become even more powerful. So what we see is a lot of people just, and there are even no counties, little areas, kingdoms, provinces, all slowly break away into a lot of factions. And don't worry, this will not be like India. This will be a little better because I don't want to burden myself for like 20 minutes just coloring areas. So, what we see going on is this area, or at least Scotland, being split up into three main countries, and Ireland, which will also have its own breakaways, be not as bad because, I mean, it will be better, but mainly it will be this smaller southern area right over here. But in the chaos, the French made a sneaky move and took some lands right over here, which could potentially cause far more issues in the future. But for now, they just decided to take these areas and hope for the best. And what we see over here is a few more countries just pop up. And just like so, we have these countries. Oh, wait, no, this is way too small. Hold on. Ah, there we go. But as we see, we have these new countries over here, which are bringing some stuff over. But the main issue here is actually what they're bringing to the table, which in this case is the idea of independence for the British Isles, and eventually unity. And someone does not like that. So essentially what we see is the French holding a far larger and more powerful grip over the British Isles, which the people obviously are not happy about. Why did I just do that? But potentially we could see how much better or worse that ends up in the next episode. Also, why are you... Now, the last thing we do see in this video before I end this is the finally actually, the discovery of Mesopotamia, at least in this area right over here, as well as this area, which would definitely be discovered. And we will obviously have the Caucasus country right over here try to yoink this for themselves, which they do actually quite well. But what we do see is, after a large loss of land, someone wants to gain back their power, and I mean, rightfully so, because I mean, they did have a very bad and unlucky ruler in terms for them, so what they want to is eventually gain back some of that power, which will end up working quite well because Mesopotamia is quite a nice area, at least for agriculture and obviously multiple other things. But the reason they don't take more is because there have been a few other countries that have popped up in this area. And the main one being this very large Mesopotamian area right here. And is this a dark purple? Yes. Is this an old empire? Maybe. But what we do end up seeing is even more exploration go on to these areas until even more is discovered. Until they slowly edge their way over here, until they actually meet up with India. And now, as a matter of fact, this also technically connects up to China. And that also technically means that we have finally gotten all three areas finally discovered. And I'm not going to do that because that means they just discovered all of... No. But basically, we have finally connected the three areas that have been apart for such a long time, technically four now, all together. And with that, I'm going to end this video. Obviously, we've had a few cliffhangers that could be going on to the next episode, and totally not an old empire that's going to come back and jump everyone. Now, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see more of the next episode, which should be coming a lot sooner, it would be very much appreciated. But the other thing I want to quickly mention is an upload schedule. Now, will I commit to this? Probably not. Am I going to give the idea? Yes. Now, essentially, my goal over here is to post like 4 times a week, because like out of the 4, it's hopefully going to be on every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. Again, will I commit? Absolutely not. I'm posting this on a Tuesday. So with all that said, again, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you on the next one.